Let's play some damn chess.
What happened? Who are you? Where do you come from? What
China.
did you go through? And we're all here.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, first of all, I just got to say thanks to you, Derek.
Street whore.
Like I've like you said, I've never really told my story about where I am today in the terms of faith and all that kind of stuff publicly because it's a bit daunting when you're a Bible scholar to start talking about the fact that you no longer.
Why in the hell would not let me play the damn time?
That's the whole thing. I started off as a Christian, and I'm not anymore.
Not attorney.
And that's kind of so that's the long story short. But we'll go through a bit more.
Suck my slut.
I really felt over the past year after getting to know you that
give me the goddamn
I've actually come into the community, the atheist community, or the whatever we want to call it, and found that support and the way the community takes care of each other and supports each other has really given me the confidence to be able to own it, and that's kind of why I want to do this is because I'm not really afraid anymore of what it means socially or academically or whatever to own where I am. And so it's so I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate being able to come out.
Slut.
Is it okay that
from
I ask an answer or not? Anytime I ask something, feel free not to answer and totally respect it. Just so you know, it's not awkward because you are in an employment situation. And so you mentioned a little bit of fear, and we haven't even gotten into your story yet. So is it okay that I ask,
you suck.
Were you afraid that this
opening
up about this could potentially damage your career?
You suck.
I've thought a lot about it, and honestly, I still don't know that. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. I don't think it'll be a problem. I mean,
you suck.
My institution does have a
you
policy
suck.
That you have to be supportive of their foundational documents or whatever, and it's an institution that was founded on conservative Christianity.
From China,
it's changed a lot over the past 20 years, and so anybody that's Norwegian or in the Norwegian context 20 years ago would be shocked that somebody from would be able to talk about their lack
military,
of
all the Chinese scientists, all the Chinese government,
but
kill all of the God's
studies program.
That way, China can never be a threat to the
social
United
sciences
States
program, and there's a lot more freedom to do what you want to do, and there's a lot of academic as well. So I think the conclusions I come to because of my academic convictions, that's up to me. So, but I've been really worried about it, and also just the social thing, what will my colleagues think? I don't know where that went.
That's a lingering thing that hangs over my head and many others. The taboo of saying I don't buy it. There's a taboo and not.
No, I ain't talking Joseph Stalin either. I'm talking about Stalin.
I'm throwing that at the audience. Think about it.
And that kind of that's a good segue back into the beginning, because I think that taboo really goes back to my childhood. I grew up in a Christian.
Stupid! Kiss that night goodbye.
I'm the youngest of two children, and my mom was
that
a
night
stay-at-home mom, but she went to a Bible study fellowship. Was like this big this community of Bible studies. It was it's like a national thing. I don't know if it still exists, but she was big into it, and lots of women would meet during the day, and that was kind of like one of the things that she did regularly was go to this Bible study. She became like a group leader, and was kind of doing it hardcore, and so it was there was a lot of Bible focus in the childhood, and so I would do her lessons with her when I was a kid. It was part of it was learning the Bible that the adults were learning. I was doing the same lessons with her when I was 6 or 7 years old. So I was already kind of into that flow, right? But I don't think I can't ever remember my parents ever being strict, saying you have to be Christian, you have to do this or that. But I did everything to be right anyway, so I just had that need to not mess things up. So I just kind of assumed that that's the right way to go. And then we went to a Methodist church actually when I was really young. But then we started going to a Mennonite church.
Now fuck up and take that poem right here.
Some of my family came from. And so the Mennonite church is this kind of weird, socially somewhat liberal, but biblically very conservative church. So like they're pacifists.
Come on, you slut.
Like much more, I would say, like they're not full on evangelicals anyway. But biblically, the church I went to was pretty evangelical. It was pretty solid into the Bible is right, and it's the truth of God, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, like knowing that like the worst thing you could be was an atheist. Like that's for me that was like we knew at church like there's a lot of things you can mess up in life and still be forgiven. Like that narrative of like there's prison ministries and there's ministries for basically anybody. But atheists, they have rejected God, they're going straight to hell. Like that was the narrative that was in my mind.
Me too.
Damn it.
Yeah, and that's like so when you ask like
my motherfucking dick, bitch.
What does it feel like? To have that change when you're growing up, like it's still that little kid that believes that the atheist is gonna burn in hell. Is still in there screaming for so long.
Suck my motherfucking dick, bitch.
So I mean, as a kid, I grew up in the same way everybody did. Went to youth groups, went to church, and I hated church really. But I went to it.
My motherfucking dick, bitch. You suck my dick.
I'm not a sit still for long periods of time kind of guy, and it was tough. I would get in trouble, and like I remember one time pretty early on, it was like we were in Sunday school, and the Sunday school teacher was talking about the burning bush story, right? And like I'm there fidgeting and making trouble, and she like looks at me and says, "Matthew, what did God say?" And I was like, "I am who I am." And I was like, I can listen and goof off at the same time, but it was just hard for me to be that kid that did everything right in church, but I really pushed to be a good person. And so I went to a Christian high school, Mennonite high school, and there it was like you had chapel services every day, Bible classes,
you suck my slut.
And it was the focus was on that, and so through that time, I got more and more focused on that. You have to have God in your life. You have to do something for God with your life. That's just the way it is. That's the way to do it.
Do you have a defining moment in your life? Like me, I would say I remember in sixth grade having this kind of defining, I really committed and submitted my life. Even though I had learned about the Bible like you, I grew up in church. Is there a moment in which you thought, I'm serious about this now?
Yeah, and so for me it was. Well, I mean, I of course had like a lot of commitment. I think when I was younger, but the real conversion moment for me was when I was 17, and I was a pretty good kid. I didn't get in a lot of trouble. I had when we went on a school trip to Costa Rica, I had a couple of drinks, and goofed off a little bit. Like I stunk some whiskey or moonshine from my dad or whatever, but like I didn't get into a lot of trouble. And but when I was 17, I did something pretty stupid that was really hurtful to somebody else who was not but I remember that relationship pretty well. And I did this also. I did it at school, which is something that also is never smart. And so I got in a lot of trouble. And like got suspended from school for a while.
Bitch, you suck my dick, bitch.
And of course,
you suck my dick.
I remember going into the principal's office afterward, and it was kind of like this, "Are we gonna let you back in?" kind of feeling. And he says to me, "What is wrong with your relationship with God that you could do something like this?"
Suck my dick, bitch.
And I was so hurt. I was so convicted by that. I guess would be the Christian way of saying it. Like I was like, "Oh crap! I gotta get my life together." And the only thing that I could really improve was to be totally 100% committed. I will never again do anything wrong the rest of my life. Whatever. I will always live for God 100%. Whatever. and
move, you whore.
So I was pretty lucky as a kid because I had an older brother who's in the chat right now, who got more trouble than me. So like my parents didn't I don't think they had a hard time forgiving me for the few things I messed up on because they had to deal with my brother already. But like at that point then I was like, nope, nothing more will happen. Like I'm gonna be good. And so after high school, I decided to go to Youth with a Mission. YWAM, which is a very, very conservative Christian youth mission agency.
Suck my motherfucking dick.
And so the reason I went, I guess, was pretty selfish. I know that now. Because we went, it was in Hawaii. Like, they have bases all over the world, but I had always dreamed of going to Hawaii. And so it was like, okay, I can go to Hawaii, and I can do it for God. And the church will pay for it. It was like, everything's perfect. So I went to this Youth with a Mission thing, and
goddamn fucking cunt,
and it was super conservative. It was like more conservative than I could have ever imagined. And they brought in people like doing prophecies over you and speaking in tongues and trying to get you to speak in tongues. And like this is one of the things that was amazing. I think I look back on like they did get your tongues going night. So everybody was supposed to get their tongues going, and everybody was praying and praying. And so I went out and of course because I was like, okay, God, give me the tongues, give me the tongues. We're standing there, and like we're standing there, and we're standing there, and we're standing there, and it was like I think probably for an hour. Finally, I was like, so I just like screaming because I had to get out of there. Like I felt so guilty about that for so long because like I lied about speaking in tongues, but everybody thought it was real. And like so that was like one of those moments where I was like carrying this guilt, trying to fit in, but it didn't work. Wow. And so Youth with a Mission works. You go a place for 3 months and you get some training and stuff like that. And then you I should backtrack a little because I went. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So we go to Nicaragua as part of this outreach thing. Like some people went to Uganda, some people went to Nepal. I ended up in Nicaragua. And that was just really weird because like some of the training they did, some of the stuff they talked about was like, hey, okay, we've got to go. This is a country full of Catholics. And like
Jesus.
I don't know if anybody had told them before that Catholics are Christians, but for them they weren't. Like that's kind of the level of fundamentalism we're in. Is that it wasn't possible. And so one of the things that I had to feel that was that my grandma was Catholic, right? And so we're going out there, and then the leaders are saying like, yeah, we gotta convert these Catholics and all this kind of stuff. Like, oh man, this is weird. And so it just so happened that there was this Norwegian Lutheran girl there. And the leaders felt basically the same about
suck my motherfucking dick,
Lutherans as a Catholic. Like they're not evangelical or fundamentalist or whatever they're here.
Suck my dick,
you're not fully saved or
suck
whatever.
my
Part of the group that thinks speaking in tongues is in case you're back in the night club.
No, so this is.
You suck my.
I don't know where I was. I was all these things, right?
You suck my.
I was a Mennonite. I was still belonged to the Mennonite church, but I'm out there in this what do we, I don't know what we want to call it, like this mixed evangelical-ish
kind of
charismatic thing. Okay. And they're speaking in tongues and doing all this, and it was just
man, I fucked up.
Yeah, it was just a mix of all these things. But most of the people there were super conservative when we were in
Suck my motherfucking dick, bitch.
And so I get to know this girl, Maria, who is this Norwegian girl, and
suck my
and she's
motherfucking
also having a hard time with this because
suck my dick.
she's like feels condemned by it too. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we trying to convert Catholics? Like standing on street corners, telling people that because of their sins are going to hell, and acting like dramas, and trying to get people to go to a church that we're never going to be there to ever see again. It was just kind of like we were there for us, not for them. It was the feeling like I have now. But we were doing it for God, and it was the whole you do everything for God. So we're still super committed.
You suck my motherfucking
so after that time,
you suck my
I came back to
you suck my dick, bitch.
We came back to
suck
Hawaii, and so this
suck
girl
my
turned
slut.
out to be,
Suck
more
my
than a friend.
slut.
After a while, it was a relationship that
you
it was
suck
built
my
on
dick,
a weird situation, like being in
Suck
Nicaragua, being
my
kind of
dick.
the outsiders in the group, and so she invited
suck
me
my motherfucking
back
dick.
to Norway to visit, and basically I never left, so I ended up marrying her. So I
suck my motherfucking
we stuck it out. But the process of moving to Norway was kind of strange. You have to in Norway they go an extra year to high school compared to us, and so you have to do a year of university in the States if you want to be able to go to school in Norway or to get a student visa or whatever. And so I went to Eastern Mennonite University in Mennonite school in Virginia for a year, and there I studied some mission, but I studied the Bible a lot. I had a class with Dr. Nancy Heisey, who taught about it was an intro to the Bible kind of thing, where she let me do actually my project on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I wasn't using the translation. I hadn't learned Hebrew or anything, but I was comparing passages from the translation of the Great Isaiah Scroll with Isaiah from like the NIV or whatever, and show the differences. And I was like, and I wrote this paper. At the end of the paper, I said like, man, I hope one day I can learn Hebrew so that I can do this for real. And so it was like, I think that was pretty prophetic. But so anyway, I moved to Norway, and basically what I had to do was of course, follow God and start studying theology. So I ended up in this school, and it's the place where I work. Right? So this is, I've been here off and on for the past 20 years. Wow. And so I started studying theology. I went through the first 3 years of theology, and by that, then I finished Hebrew and Greek.
You suck my
and while I was studying Hebrew and Greek, I realized that I kept asking questions like, why? And the teachers would say, it is just that way, there is no explanation. And I was like, there has to be an explanation. There's an explanation for everything. And when I couldn't get answers, I decided I needed to study linguistics. Because that would give me the tools to answer the questions. And so when my first son was born, I took a break from school. I bought the books for the first semester of linguistics courses at the University of Oxford. I read them all, and I was like, I felt like I found my home. Like I was like, this is amazing. Can you imagine reading stuff that you actually care about? I was like, after 3 years of theology, that's how I felt.
You suck my motherfucking
and so I signed up to do
dick. Just to get in your head, you've been learning this stuff. First of all, you already know in your head that this is true. You already know that God is real, this is true, the Bible is correct in your head, of course. I'm trying to get the psychology here for our audience to track along. You're reading this stuff thinking, like, I'm only going to really be able to prove my religion and have an answer for things that nobody's had answers for. Like, I can actually solve some problems for many people who are serious about the Word of God.
You suck my motherfucking dick.
And that's why theology was boring. I mean, so this kind of theology that I was exposed to was just kind of like, here's the dogmas, here's the reasons why, and it's just like, but of course it's true, so why do you even need to argue for it? Like, it's just silly. Like it was theology didn't get me going at all. Like, it was later. So, and then this kind of ties in because I started studying linguistics, and I being someone who doesn't think things through, I just signed up to do that parallel while I kept going through the theology thing. So I was doing my BA in linguistics at the same time as I was working on finishing my bachelor's in theology and then my master's in theology. And just going to two different universities at the same time. They're about like half a mile apart, so it's not hard to get back and forth. But so I'm studying linguistics, and I'm learning, like, in linguistics, there's this amazing thing that truths are just probabilities. So like when we say like there's universals, like language is like this. It means that 90% or more of languages are like this. You know, there's always going to be exceptions to everything. And if you say there's no exception, then somebody's just going to make an exception and people start saying it so that they can prove that exception is there. Like so basically, there's very, very few, truths in linguistics. So if you start learning things like that, it does something to you. And at the same time, I took a course in the Hebrew Bible where we were going into like the anthropology and the worldview.
Don't even think about it.
I had to write a term paper on the question of, is there an immortal soul evidenced in the Hebrew Bible? And like my conclusion was, there's no evidence for it in the Hebrew Bible. Like that's something that shows up later. And that was also a shock for me, because then like I realized, like, crap, what do you do if there's no immortal soul? Why do we have it in Christianity if you didn't have it in Judaism? That was like, okay, this is a bit painful, but whatever. It's academic, so deal with it and move on. So I keep learning linguistics, and I get into a program in Semitic languages with Lutz Edzard, who is a Semitist who was here in Oslo for a while, and he took really good care of me. He gave me awesome classes. There were like 3 or 4 of us all together.
Well, but petticoats are not long into the stomach, you slut.
And really inspired me, and he taught my first class in Acadian.
How King Solomon the fuck out of you.
So I remember getting John Hunegard's grammar of Acadian. I've still got it behind me here.
Man, I fucked this.
When I got
man, neither one
of
we either both fucked each other's butt, or neither one of us fucked.
You see the cuneiform things there. It was also just like my head was exploding. This is amazing. I can actually learn this stuff. And so we started learning. You learn Acadian.
You
learn that Acadian is a couple thousand years older than
dick, bitch. You suck my goddamn dick, bitch.
And then you start reading text. We read Gilgamesh, we read the Enuma Elish, we read all these kind of the Babylonian Theodicy, we read the Hammurabi's Law, we read all these things that are
bitch, you suck my dick, bitch.
And set yourself up for failure.
Myself up, right? But I'm super into the academic side.
Suck my
and so
dick.
every step of the way saying,
dick.
oh, that's really neat. I believe that. I agree. I agree with the scholarly version. I'm critical. I'm reading. I'm learning. But
don't even think about it.
Makes sense. So that's fine. So I'm just like putting that here in my head, and still I'm going to church and I'm doing the churchy things. Well, towards the end of my studies, I'm taking a course in a West African language that one of our professors happens to teach called Fulfulde. And it's like because you have to take these random languages just to get your linguistics degree, right? And so I'm taking it, and I get a call from the Norwegian Mission Society, who wants to know if me and my family could consider
move that whore! Move that whore! Move that whore!
Translator translating the Old Testament into Fulfulde, because they have an opening, they need someone, and because I literally am a linguist with a degree in theology.
This is boring! This is
would be the perfect fit, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm a perfect fit.
This is boring!
So real quick, your serious conversion is 17 years of age. You're married now. You are like dead set on linguistics. Am I breaking up or am I good?
You're good.
Okay. Dead set on linguistics. You know your stuff, and you're still like, I have a calling from God. Now you're literally doing what any Christian would say is like the most real thing a Christian can do: missionary work, going into the third world, literally trying to take the word of God and give it to these tribes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it was hardcore. We sold our house. We sold our car. We sold everything. Used all our savings to do this.
How old were you?
Yeah, we were. Let's see. It was. I would have been 25, 26, 27, something like that when we moved. So just finishing my studies, and we so we moved first to France and spent a school year learning French.
That whore
in West Africa, and so they gave us kind of a soft transition. So we lived outside Paris, went to a French school, weekends I would be in the Louvre, in the basement of the museum, and looking at all the old stuff. Hammurabi's Law, the Mesha stele,
I can do that shit
all
too,
these
dumbass.
things. I loved it. I got
What language do you speak or know or can read?
I don't know. It's a hard question, but I do
stupid
I
goddamn
can work with
motherfucker.
maybe maybe
Suck
10 or 15 languages that I use kind
Suck
of regularly. A few more that I can
Suck
navigate.
my dick.
I've forgotten a lot, so I have to look up stuff.
Suck
But I get
motherfucking
around.
dick,
Yeah.
bitch.
It's no worries.
So you're 25-ish. Do you have your 3 children at this time?
Yeah. I do know this that we left for Mali when my daughter, my youngest, so I have 3 kids, and my youngest was born at the end of 2009, and then August 2010 we went out, so that would have been 28 when we left for Mali. 3 kids. My daughter was just a few months old.
Dick, bitch.
And
a picture to give people.
Yeah. So this is there we go. This is
Man,
I've been
I
there
fucked
almost
up.
a year.
I can stuck my dick in
And this is kind of this was on
Man,
Easter.
I should have done that
The
shit
year
right
after
there.
we
That fucking
got
pissed
there.
me off.
We live in a city right on the edge of the bush. Nice. Somebody from Bamako in the chat. Nice. We lived there, and I started working as a Bible translator. But
I could have fucked his butt.
what that means is you have to learn the
that
language, you
fucking
learn the culture,
culture.
you
You
have
see?
to get kind of
That's-
immersed in everything. And then it was it was just it was supposed to be perfect, right? But like within 2 weeks of we got there, my one son
Suck my
got
dick,
malaria,
bitch.
super sick.
You suck my
It
dick,
was really freaky. Like, I mean, the doctors came and they gave him an IV, kept him at our house, like with an IV, and within the first fall, we had like malaria. It's just like, and to us,
Move, you whore!
like, what's going on? But it's part of the
Suck
fun,
my
whatever.
dick, bitch.
But even worse, like
Suck my
a few weeks
motherfucking
after we got there, the ambassador from Norway, or I guess it was like the assistant, because the ambassador was gone, or whatever. But somebody came from the embassy to tell us that they were going to close off the area we were living in the north of Mali, because it was too dangerous to be there. And so we're sitting there, and we kind of had this thing with the missionaries, and he's like, yeah, so we're going to
God
follow
damn it.
Denmark and Sweden and the US and all these other people and say that you all shouldn't be here. And one, like, some of the colleagues, our colleagues,
Suck my dick.
let them take us. Let them kill us. Like, rather be martyrs than be forced to leave. And at that point, my head's going like, don't take us. Like, send us home. That's fine. Like, and so they then what they did to kind of calm us down is they did a kidnapping course, not how to kidnap, but what to do if you're kidnapped, and like all these kind of things about both like how you act and how you can keep your faith and all that kind of stuff.
Suck my motherfucking dick.
I've never had this to anyone ever, but like I went and I was memorizing
You suck my dick,
the
bitch.
Muslim confession of faith like that.
Muslim radicals.
And this was because Al Qaeda in Western Africa was just above the river, just north of where we were. And so, like, this was the scary thing, is that like there was a real danger that you could be kidnapped. And so everybody else is like, how to keep your faith. And I'm there, like, thinking, like, I'm just going to convert. I will convert from day one. They will not kill me if I say I'm a Muslim. Just right. And I had so much guilt about that too. It was like I would save myself, Right. But anyway, still Christian, still fighting the good fight. We're still there, and things got progressively worse. And so, like, one of the things that we had was we would go to this pool. There was like this one place restaurant a few minutes outside of town, little restaurant with a pool at a hotel. It was like kind of felt like a safe place. And but also the French Foreign Legion, who was stationed in our town,
Suck my motherfucking dick,
there as well. And like the officers definitely didn't believe the story that I was a Bible translator. Like,
suck my
like,
dick.
like, yeah,
Come on, you
Bible
slut.
translator. Like, oh, translator. I'm like, Bible translator. Yeah, like, and they would tell me stuff, right? And they'd be like, so we saw, you know, six cars of Al-Qaeda people across the river today. What do your people know? And I'm like, don't have people, but yeah, that sounds bad. And so like, they were definitely there. Like you had the French Foreign Legion there as kind of this last line of defense.
God damn it.
So it was pretty intense, and it really came to a head like right before the summer, the first year we were there, when I was at work and sitting there doing some translation stuff. And what I got a call from our Norwegian leader who said, "Get outside right now, something's going on." So I come outside, and she's like, "There's something going on at the kids' school. We have to go get them." My kids went to this little French school where it was like a preschool school combined. And we go out to get the car, and our director, the African director who's running it, was like, "No, do not go out there. It was a demonstration, but it's turned into a riot. And there are people going to attack the school. Like they're on their way to attack the school. And they're between us and the school. You can't go there; it'll just make it worse." And so me, I was just like, "What do we do?" Like, "Nope, you just gotta wait." I'm like, "Okay." So I go back up to the office and kept working. Like, what kind of psycho can do that? But anyway, I did. Kept on plugging on my work. And later in the day, I got updates kind of, and they said, they called the Army, because the Army kids went there. And so the Army came and has surrounded the building. They're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And you can go pick them up at lunchtime. So, okay. So then we went up at lunchtime. A couple of the guys from the office came with me to make sure things were safe. But go and pick up the kids, and there are, like, literally, there's like a tank and like armored vehicles and 50 soldiers surrounding this building, this school. And so I get the kids out, and we go home and start telling my wife about this. And it was pretty bad. Like the kids said, they got the warning, so they shut all the windows and all the like metal gutters and I don't know what the word is in English. Sorry, the metal things put in front of the windows and everything. And like they shut it all down, and they had to hide under the desks, and then there was like a lot of banging, and then like my one son said, and then we heard like the great heaven stone falling on us, and like we don't know what that was, like if it was a grenade, if it was shooting, what it was, but something massive, like something really loud and scary. And this was like we put our kids in that situation, and so we pulled them out of school for a little bit, and after a while we went back to Norway for the summer. And said to the mission, kind of like, this is too much.
Fucking bullshit.
It's really hard. Like we don't know what to do. And they were like, "Oh, it sounds like you're having doubts. It sounds like you're having a really hard time. You should see a psychologist that can help get you straightened out." So they sent us to somebody that basically told us, like, "Yeah, so we're going to help you get in the mindset where you can go back."
This is boring as fuck.
Yeah,
dude.
And so we did that in the summer, had a really hard time figuring out what to do. And we ended up,
just to say, like, during your sessions, you did sessions, right? Were they manipulative in a way of trying to really get you to go, or was there not, like...
That's how I feel now. I don't really know. I don't really remember it well because I think I was so traumatized in the emotions and everything what was going on. But my feeling now is that we were manipulated to think that, like, we were just told, like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with you. Your fear is real, but you have to trust that you'll be taken care of and all that. And it was just kind of like, it worked. I mean, so we went back, right? And so we went back. Everybody told us everything's fine. There's no danger. There's nothing to fear. And all that. And went back. And like the moment we got back, I could tell that it was like my wife was changed. Like it was not okay that we went back. And she got like fairly sick throughout that fall. and ended up getting sent home. So we got like a few months into the fall, and she got sent home by the doctor because like she had some like her blood values were weird, and he was like, no, I would send you to the emergency room in Norway. So we got and the mission told me that their policy was to not send families home with people that are evacuated for illness. So they wanted me to stay, or they told me to stay in Norway with my 3 kids.
Suck my
butt without my wife, as she got sent home for medical reasons. And we stayed there with this a year and a half old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
Without their mom. What in the world?
Yeah. And so definitely like things that and we let it happen, you know, and that's for me the hardest thing looking back has always been like,
goddamn fuck,
why didn't I just get on a plane? Right. My parents offered to pay. Like my friends offered to pay. My friends' parents offered to pay. Like anybody would have helped us out, you know. But we just didn't see it. But then after a few weeks, then it was obvious my wife wasn't coming back, and so we started planning that we would go home. So we went home.
God damn it!
We packed up everything because I kind of knew at that point we weren't going to be coming back. Packed everything up, drove down to the capital, and I remember like this. We stayed with this older Norwegian couple in the capital. They gave us fortekål. It's a Norwegian dish of lamb and cabbage. The night we left, and we got on a plane, and when I'd been talking with my parents all the time, we got to Brussels. We flew like from Bamako to Brussels, and we got out. We came up the stairs, and there were my parents. Like they met me there, and wow. And they helped us get back to Bergen, to Norway, where Maria's family is, and get settled. And like it was just horrible because there was so much pain and so much fear, and yet like from the moment we got there, I'm thinking, how can I get back? Like I have to do my job. I have to be. And it was just like I was so ingrained in the you have to do these things for God. And so so long story short, we were staying in the basement at my in-laws' house, and it's not the best situation. I was not in a good place, and I regret the way I was at that point. But we realized that we couldn't go back. And so my wife pretty quickly found a job pastoring in a church on the other side of Norway, where in the town where we live now. So we packed up and moved, and so it was kind of like this shock. Like, what am I going to do? You know, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I felt like I kind of missed that calling, that it didn't work out, like I failed at that or whatever. And we had to find something to do. And I remember that there was this guy, this American missionary, who had called me after we kind of decided we weren't going back. And he said to me, so I wonder if you've gotten to the point where you know that all of this was God's plan. And like I think that like when I look back, that is something that made me turn and look in a different direction. Because that was the most horrible thing anyone ever said to me. It was the most horrible experience I had been through. All the danger, all the fear, all the pain. And then this guy is going to tell me that was God's plan? Because he was going to use me for something better? It was shocking. It was so painful. Oh gosh, your experience.
God,
and then
damn it!
Saying, by the way, that was God. You know, it almost makes you wonder. The people who wrote the story about Joseph And he says, "Don't worry, what you guys meant for evil, God meant it for good."
Yeah, exactly. And that was the feeling. And he wasn't alone. We heard it a lot. The machine would say, "Oh, God, we got you out in time," because literally 2 days after I left, the village where I was supposed to go to talk to some guys was attacked by Al-Qaeda, and a couple of French guys were kidnapped. And then the week after, then northern Mali was attacked, and there was a war, and it's basically still going on. This war in northern Mali. So it all went to hell. So fast. So there was no doubt that the plan was that God's plan was not the thing we were focused on. It was a really bad place. It was a really bad situation. And so hearing that was just crazy. But still, my wife was a pastor. I'm this missionary guy, and so I was like, what am I going to do? So what do you do when you're not a work missionary? Well, first I worked for the Sunday school in Norway for a while, for a year, doing making program materials for the Sunday school. And then I was like, yeah, of course. What do? You try to get your PhD, right? Of course. So I applied for
a
scholarship to do my PhD on the project on the book Jubilees, because with the Semitic languages, and you love Semitic languages, you do weird things, and so I learned Ethiopic, and Jubilees is one of those texts, and I had an advisor tell me, hey, you should do something with Jubilees, and Jubilees is also in the Hebrew Dead Sea Scrolls, so it was a fun thing, so I got started on that, and I remember the first meeting, this conference I went to, pretty soon after I started, in 2013 or something like that. And there's all these scholars around there. I said, so why are you doing your PhD? Like, oh, because I couldn't be a missionary anymore. And I remember, I'm so embarrassed about that. Thinking back on that, and this guy, this really nice American guy that came up to me after, he's like, yeah, don't say that. It doesn't play well. Yeah, you don't say you're not a work missionary. You just had to do a PhD. It's not a great thing. But anyway, so as I'm kind of going through my PhD stuff, I'm working harder and harder to make sense of this growing body of knowledge I have about the Bible, about ancient literature, about the instability of texts and traditions, and the way things are moving around, the way the Bible is rewritten and reinterpreted all the time. And at the same time, my wife was working as a pastor, we're in the church, we're doing this kind of thing. And so we kind of, in my mind, I'm taking steps where I've kind of rejected a lot of the basic dogmas already. Got to the point where I was pretty and moving very much towards the liberal side of things, of Christianity. I don't really believe in hell anymore. I don't
this is boring as shit.
I don't have anything against anybody. I don't have any. It was just kind of just let people live their lives, and
that was boring as shit.
The marble floors gleam under fluorescent lights as thousands gather in what could be mistaken for a concert arena. The bass drums through your chest, the light show rivals anything on Broadway, and somewhere in all of this spectacle there's supposed to be worship. But something ancient whispers that this isn't what was meant to be. In 367 AD, a young priest named Jerome sat in a cave in Bethlehem, translating ancient Hebrew text by candlelight. He came across a passage in Amos that made him pause, his stylus hovering over parchment. The prophet's words cut like a blade through time. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Jerome looked up from his work, troubled. God-hating worship? The God who created humanity for fellowship rejected their religious gatherings? He continued reading, and the answer emerged. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your songs, I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. That was over 16 centuries ago. Yet those words echo with unsettling relevance through our modern sanctuaries. Welcome to Professor Archive, where we excavate the uncomfortable truths buried in centuries of tradition and cultural adaptation. Before we dig deeper, I'm curious.
Does she have a spit effect or
I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. That was over 16 centuries ago. Yet those words echo with unsettling relevance through our modern sanctuaries. Welcome to Professor Archive, where we excavate the uncomfortable truths buried beneath centuries of tradition and cultural adaptation. Before we dig deeper, I'm curious, where are you watching this from, and what time is it right now? Drop your location and time in the comments. I'm genuinely fascinated by how these questions resonate across different cultures and time zones. The Cathedral of St. Peter in Rome took 120 years to build. Michelangelo died before seeing the completion of his magnificent dome. Bernini's Baldachin required the bronze stripped from the ancient Pantheon. It stands today as one of the most breathtaking achievements of human architecture. Yet when it was being constructed, a German monk named Martin Luther walked through Rome and was horrified, not by the beauty, but by the cost. The indulgences being sold to fund this architectural marvel contradicted everything he'd read in Scripture. By the time he nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg in 1517, the first item on his list dealt with this very issue, the commercialization of grace. Fast forward 500 years and the forms have changed, but the pattern persists. In 2019, Forbes magazine reported that megachurch pastors collectively owned private jets worth over $200 million. One prominent pastor defended his $54 million jet by saying he couldn't get in a long tube with demons when referring to commercial flights. The congregation funding this lifestyle isn't composed of millionaires. They're ordinary people who've been taught that their giving secures God's favor. This isn't a new phenomenon. It's the first practice that has consistently drawn divine ire throughout history. The transformation of spiritual shepherding into a profit enterprise. When archaeologists excavated the ancient city of Corinth in the early 20th century, they found something remarkable. Among the ruins of the Temple of Apollo, they discovered bronze coins scattered near what had been the temple treasury. But more interesting were the inscriptions on pottery fragments found throughout the city. These ostraca revealed detailed records of religious transactions, payments for prophecies, fees for spiritual consultations, charges for participation in sacred meals. The Apostle Paul arrived in Corinth around 50 AD and encountered a religious marketplace that would have been familiar to any modern observer. Philosophy teachers charged fees, religious practitioners sold their services, and spiritual authority came with a price tag. Paul's response was radical. He refused payment. He made tents during the day and preached at night, deliberately distancing himself from the commercial religious class. In his letter to the Corinthian church, he wrote with barely contained frustration. Unlike so many, we do not peddle the word of God for profit. That phrase, peddle, comes from the Greek word, which specifically meant to retail something, often with the implication of adulterating the product for greater profit, like watering down wine to sell more of it. The early church took this principle seriously. The Didache, a Christian text from around 100 AD, explicitly warns, "Get that piece of body!" Speaks in the Spirit as a prophet, but only if they have the ways of the Lord. So the false prophet and the prophet will be known by their ways. Any prophet who orders a meal in the Spirit, wine to sell more of it. The early church took this principle seriously. The Didache, a Christian text from around 100 AD, explicitly prophet, like watering down wine to sell more of it. The early church took this principle seriously. The Didache, a Christian text from around 100 AD, explicitly warns, not everyone who speaks in the Spirit is a prophet, but only if they have the ways of the Lord. So the false prophet and the prophet will be known by their ways. Any prophet who orders a meal in the Spirit shall not eat of it. Otherwise, he is a false prophet. The document goes on to specify that traveling teachers who ask for money are false prophets. Yet today, seed faith theology has convinced millions that giving money to religious leaders will result in financial miracles. A study by the University of Cambridge in 2018 found that prosperity gospel churches in Nigeria, where crushing poverty affects over 60% of the population, extracted an average of 25% of household income from their members. Families would skip meals to pay tithes, believing that their sacrifice would trigger divine wealth transfers. The pastors of these churches, meanwhile, lived in compounds that rivaled presidential estates. But there's a practice even more insidious because it hides behind the appearance of devotion itself. In ancient Israel, the prophet Hosea recorded one of the most emotionally charged statements in Scripture. God speaks through him saying, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings." To understand why this was revolutionary, you need to understand what sacrifice meant in the ancient Near East. From Egypt to Babylon, from Greece to Rome, religion was transactional. You gave the gods their due, performed the correct rituals, and in return, they blessed you. Miss a festival, forget an offering, perform the ceremony incorrectly, and divine punishment would follow. The temple in Jerusalem, before its destruction in 70 AD, was a factory of ritual sacrifice. Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, recorded that during a single Passover celebration, over 250,000 lambs were sacrificed. The courtyard ran with blood. The smell of burning flesh was constant. The priests worked in shifts because the sheer volume of animals being slaughtered was overwhelming. It was an impressive display of religious devotion by any measure. Yet Jesus walked through this magnificent operation and quoted Hosea, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice." He said this while defending his disciples for eating grain on the Sabbath, for healing on the day of rest, for prioritizing human need over religious regulation. The religious leaders were meticulous about their rituals, but would devour widows' houses, as Jesus put it. They would tithe their spices, counting out individual mint leaves and cumin seeds to ensure they gave precisely 10%, while simultaneously ignoring justice and mercy. This brings us to the second practice that divine authority consistently condemns, the elevation of ritual performance over ethical behavior. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered between 1947 and 1956, revealed something fascinating about first-century Judaism. The community at Qumran, likely as seems, had developed an elaborate system of ritual purity laws that went far beyond biblical requirements.
You're fucking goddamn Christ.
They had rules for washing, for eating, for bathroom procedures, for how to pray, for how to dress.
Oh, fucking Christ.
Members who broke these rules faced increasingly severe punishments, from reduced food rations to temporary expulsion to permanent exile. Yet in all their thousands of manuscript fragments, there's remarkably little about caring for the poor, advocating for justice, or showing mercy to the broken. It was a community obsessed with external purity while the Roman Empire ground Palestinian peasants into poverty all around them. This pattern repeats throughout church history with disturbing regularity. In medieval Europe, the church developed detailed penitential manuals that assigned specific penances for specific sins. Steal a chicken? 3 days of fasting. Have impure thoughts? 40 days of penance. Murder someone? 7 years of prescribed religious exercises. The manuals were exhaustive, covering every conceivable sin with mathematical precision. Yet these same centuries saw widespread corruption, the Crusades, the Inquisition, and systematic oppression of peasants by the nobility with full church blessing. The Reformers challenged some of this, but by the 18th and 19th centuries, new forms of ritualism had emerged. The holiness movements developed their own codes. No dancing, no theater attendance, no alcohol, no card playing, no jewelry, no makeup. Women's dress lengths were debated with theological seriousness. The specific translation of the Bible you used could determine your spiritual status. Today, this manifests in churches that will excommunicate a woman for wearing pants, but ignore domestic abuse. Communities that scrutinize Sunday attendance records while their members practice ruthless business ethics Monday through Friday. Organizations that enforce strict dress codes for worship while remaining silent about systemic injustice in their cities. A 2021 study by sociologist Bradley Wright analyzed disciplinary actions in conservative churches over a 50-year period. He found that violations of behavioral codes related to dress, entertainment, and lifestyle choices were prosecuted at a rate 8 times higher than offenses related to deception, injustice, or lack of compassion. The study concluded that modern religious communities often mirror the ancient pattern, meticulous about the visible, indifferent to the substantial. In the archives of the Vatican Library, there's a document from 1486 that changed the course of history in ways its authors never intended. The Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, provided theological justification and practical procedures for identifying and executing witches. Written by Catholic clergyman Heinrich Kramer, it was reprinted 29 times by 1669 and served as a guidebook for the witch trials that swept through Europe and eventually the American colonies. What makes this relevant to our discussion is not the specific horror of the witch trials, though that would be enough. It's what the document reveals about the third practice that consistently draws divine condemnation. The pursuit of power and control dressed in the language of spiritual protection. When Jesus confronted the religious authorities of his time, one of his harshest criticisms was this. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others, but they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. The religious system had become a mechanism of control, with the leaders as gatekeepers who determined who was in and who was out, who was acceptable and who was condemned. The early church initially resisted this pattern. In Paul's letters, we see a messiness, a fluidity of spiritual expression that modern hierarchical structures find threatening. In Corinth, apparently anyone could bring to him a lesson, a revelation, an interpretation. Paul had the right of establishing order, but the baseline assumption was broad participation, not centralized control. By the 4th century, everything had changed. When Constantine made Christianity the favored religion of the Roman Empire in 313 AD, the church rapidly adopted imperial structures. Bishops became political powers. Theological disputes became matters of state. The Council of Nicaea in 325 wasn't just a theological discussion. It was an imperial assembly where Constantine himself presided, using church unity as a tool for political cohesion. The pattern accelerated from there. By the medieval period, the church claimed authority not just over spiritual matters, but over all of life. Kings were crowned or deposed based on papal approval. The interdict, where church services would be suspended for entire regions, was used as a weapon of political control. To be excommunicated wasn't just spiritual death, it meant social and economic death as well. The Protestant Reformation challenged Catholic authority, but often replaced it with new forms of control. John Calvin's Geneva became a theocracy where the consistory, a religious council, regulated everything from attendance at sermons to business practices to family conflicts. In 1653, Michael Servetus was burned at the stake in Geneva for his theological views with Calvin's approval. The reformers who had fled Catholic persecution were now illogical. John Calvin's Geneva became a theological control. To be excommunicated wasn't just spiritual death, it meant social and economic death as well. The Protestant Reformation challenged Catholic authority, but often replaced it with new forms of control. John Calvin's Geneva became a theocracy where the consistory, a religious council, regulated everything from attendance at sermons to business practices to family conflicts. In 1553, Michael Servetus was burned at the stake in Geneva for his theological views with Calvin's approval. The reformers who had fled Catholic persecution were now persecuting others. In colonial America, the Puritans established communities with strict religious governance. Roger Williams was banished from Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1636 for suggesting that civil government shouldn't enforce religious law. Anne Hutchinson was tried and exiled for holding unauthorized Bible studies in her home. The Salem witch trials of 1692 were the culmination of a system where religious authority claimed the right to identify and eliminate spiritual threats. Today, the mechanisms look different, but the pattern persists. Some churches practice shepherding or covering doctrines, where members must submit major life decisions to pastoral authority. Dating, career choices, financial decisions, where to live, all become subject to leadership approval. Former members of these communities report that leaving often meant being cut off from friends and family who remained. A 2020 investigation by the Houston Chronicle documented over 700 cases of sexual abuse in Southern Baptist churches over a 20-year period. The investigative series revealed that the protection of institutional power and reputation consistently took precedence over the protection of victims. Abusive pastors were quietly moved to other churches. Victims who spoke up were pressured into silence or blamed for the abuse. The structure prioritized preserving the system over pursuing justice. This is spiritual authority functioning as a mechanism of control rather than service, and it's a direct violation of Jesus' explicit teaching. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. It will not be so among you, but whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant. By the way, what's your profession? I'm curious
a professional bomb!
Thinking through these
a
questions.
Professional bomb!
And if you're finding value in this content, if it's making you think or giving you language for things you've sensed, couldn't quite articulate, consider leaving a super thanks. It genuinely helps us continue creating content that challenges comfortable assumptions. In 1861, ministers across the American South preached that slavery was biblical. They cited specific passages. Ephesians 6:5, slaves, obey your earthly masters. Colossians 3:22, slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. 1 Peter 2:18, slaves, accept the authority of your masters with all deference. The Presbyterian Church in the Confederate States adopted a formal statement in 1864 declaring that slavery was one of the conditions of society sanctioned by divine authority. The same book, the same God, was being claimed by abolitionists in the North as the foundation for their opposition to slavery. Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery to become one of the most powerful voices for abolition, wrote about the Christianity of slaveholders. I love the pure, peaceable, and impartial Christianity of Christ. I therefore hate the corrupt, slave-holding, women-whipping, cradle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of this land. This brings us to perhaps the most damaging practice on our list: the selective reading and application of Scripture to justify cultural prejudices and economic interests while ignoring clear biblical themes of justice, liberation, and inclusion. When archaeologists excavated Oxyrhynchus in Egypt in the late 19th century, they found something remarkable in the ancient garbage dumps. Thousands of papyrus fragments preserved in the dry climate included some of our earliest Christian manuscripts. Among them were fragments of the Gospels from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. What's fascinating is what these early Christians seem to emphasize. The texts copied most frequently were the Beatitudes, Jesus' teachings about caring for the poor, his criticisms of religious hypocrisy, and his inclusive approach to social outcasts. Contrast that with what gets emphasized in many modern churches. A 2016 analysis of sermons by the Barna Group found that fewer than 10% of sermons in American evangelical churches addressed themes of social justice, poverty, or systemic oppression. Meanwhile, over 60% included content about personal morality, family values, or individual spiritual disciplines. This selective emphasis isn't accidental. Throughout church history, those in power have highlighted biblical passages that supported the status quo while minimizing ones that challenged it. When William Wilberforce fought to end the British slave trade in the late 18th century, he faced opposition from clergy who argued that disturbing the economic order was unbiblical. The Bishop of Rochester testified before Parliament that slavery was not contrary to the laws of God or man. In the American South during the Civil Rights Movement, white ministers published a statement in 1963 criticizing Martin Luther King Jr.'s direct action campaigns as unwise and untimely. They urged African Americans to pursue their grievances through the courts rather than demonstrations. King's response, the letter from Birmingham jail, remains one of the most powerful critiques of church complicity with injustice ever written. He wrote about his disappointment with white moderates, who preferred order to justice, and with white churches that remained silent in the face of oppression. The pattern continues today. Churches organize campaigns against certain moral issues while remaining largely silent about economic exploitation, environmental destruction, or systemic racism. They'll preach extensively about sexual ethics while barely mentioning economic ethics.
I see a dick in your
emphasize verses
future.
about
I
submission
see
and
a
obedience
dick.
while glossing over Jesus' confrontations with religious and political power. The prophet Micah lived in the 8th century BC during relative prosperity in Judah. The nation was secure, the economy was growing, and religious observance was flourishing. Yet Micah saw beneath the surface to the corruption that prosperity had enabled. He prophesied against leaders who tear the skin off my people and the flesh off their bones while maintaining their religious devotions. His summary of what God actually requires is famous. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? Justice, kindness, humility. Not complicated theological systems or elaborate rituals or aggressive culture war campaigns. The simplicity of that statement is its power and its challenge. But there's another practice that might be even more prevalent because it hides behind good intentions and positive thinking. In the ruins of ancient Pompeii, preserved by volcanic ash in 79 AD, archaeologists found temples to numerous gods. There was the Temple of Apollo, the Temple of Jupiter, the Temple of Venus, and dozens of smaller shrines scattered throughout the city. What's interesting is that Romans didn't see these different deities as competing claims to truth. They were complementary. You could honor Apollo in the morning and Venus in the evening. You could make offerings to Jupiter for military success and to Mercury for business prosperity. Religion was a buffet, not a choice between competing truths. The early Christians refused to participate in this religious pluralism, not because they were intolerant in the modern sense, but because they believed they had encountered an exclusive truth claim. Jesus said, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That's not a polite, inclusive statement. It's a radical claim that cost thousands of early Christians their lives because they wouldn't add Jesus to their pantheon of gods. They insisted he was a different kind of truth entirely. Fast forward to the 21st century, and a curious thing has happened. The exclusive truth claim remains in theory, but in practice, many churches have adopted a form of syncretism that would have horrified the early martyrs.
Fucking damn it.
This is the fifth practice. The blending of biblical faith with cultural values, commercial interests, and political ideologies until the distinctive message becomes unrecognizable. In 2006, a church in Arizona made headlines by raffling off a Hummer SUV as an attendance incentive. In 2014, a Florida church held a gun giveaway to attract new members. These are extreme examples, but they represent a broader pattern. American Christianity in particular has become so thoroughly entwined with consumerism, nationalism, and political partisanship that outsiders can't distinguish the religious message from the cultural package. Sociologist James Davison Hunter documented this in his book, To Change the World, showing how conservative Christianity had allied itself so completely with political conservatism that the two became essentially inseparable in public perception.
What?
Meanwhile, progressive Christianity did the same thing with liberal political ideology. Both sides claimed biblical authority for their positions, but both had effectively allowed their cultural and political commitments to determine how they read Scripture rather than the other way around. The early church faced similar temptations. When Christianity became the official religion of Rome, suddenly it was fashionable to be Christian. Everyone wanted to join, but what were they joining? Were they converting to Christ or conforming to the new social expectation? Church historian Everett Ferguson notes that the rapid growth of Christianity after Constantine came at a cost. The line between genuine spiritual transformation and social opportunism became blurred. In medieval Europe, Christianity became so identified with European culture that the Crusaders could slaughter Muslims and Jews while marching under the sign of the cross.
What?
In colonial periods, missionaries often couldn't distinguish between spreading the gospel and spreading European civilization. Indigenous converts were taught that becoming Christian meant abandoning their cultural practices and adopting European dress, language, and customs.
Suck my
Today's syncretism is more subtle but no less real. The prosperity gospel blends Christianity with consumer capitalism, teaching that faith is a mechanism for material acquisition. Nationalist Christianity blends biblical teaching with patriotic ideology, suggesting that God has a special relationship with particular nations. Therapeutic Christianity blends spiritual teaching with pop psychology, reducing the gospel to a self-help program for feeling better about yourself. What gets lost in all these blendings is the sharp edge of biblical faith that cuts against every culture's assumptions. Jesus didn't come to make us comfortable. He came to transform us, and transformation is rarely comfortable. The biblical prophets weren't motivational speakers. They were disturbers of the peace, calling people away from comfortable compromises back to demanding truth. But perhaps nowhere is the distance between biblical teaching and modern practice more stark than in how we conceptualize and pursue worship itself. In 1909, Charles Taze Russell, founder of what would become the Jehovah's Witnesses, gave a speech in which he said, "The nominal church is in love with the world and consequently has become the world's friend." He was critiquing what he saw as the entertainment-focused direction of church services. Over a century later, his observation has become prophetic, though not in the way he intended. The sixth practice that has drawn consistent biblical criticism is the transformation of corporate worship into entertainment spectacle, where the congregation becomes an audience and spiritual experience is measured by emotional intensity rather than transformation of life. This is tricky territory because the Bible itself records enthusiastic worship. David danced before the Ark of the Covenant with such abandon that his wife despised him for it. The Psalms speak of shouting joyfully, clapping hands, dancing, and making loud noises before the Lord. So it's not the enthusiasm itself that's the problem, it's the purpose and the direction. In ancient Israel, when worship became disconnected from ethical living, God rejected it. The prophet Amos records God saying, I despise your festivals. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. That's a shocking statement. God hating worship music? But the next line explains it. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. The worship was rejected not because it was too loud or too enthusiastic, but because it was disconnected from living justly. Fast forward to today. The worship industry has become exactly that, an industry. Hillsong Music, one of the largest Christian music producers, generates millions in annual revenue. Worship leaders become celebrities with Instagram followings and concert tours.
Talking about Instagram.
Best sound systems, the most dramatic lighting, the most skilled musicians. A 2018 study found that the average megachurch spends over $200,000 annually on audio and visual
Suck
equipment.
my motherfucking dick, bitch.
None of this is inherently wrong. Good music and quality production can enhance worship. But somewhere in the professionalization and commercialization of worship, something has shifted. Worship has become a product to be consumed, rather than a practice that transforms. People church shop based on the quality of the worship experience, the way they choose a concert venue. If the music doesn't move them, they find another church. The early church had no instruments, no light shows, no professional musicians. In fact, for the first several centuries, Christian worship was largely a cappella.
The taste is gotta move.
Instruments were associated with pagan temple worship and secular entertainment, so early Christians deliberately avoided them. What they emphasized instead was participation. Everyone sang. The Eucharist was a full meal that everyone shared. Spontaneous prophecy and teaching were expected from various members of the congregation. It was participatory, not performative. The shift toward performative worship happened gradually. By the medieval period, worship had become a show that the priest performed while the congregation watched. The Mass was in Latin, which most people didn't understand. The actions happened behind screens and at the altar far from the people. The congregation's role was to observe and receive, not to participate. The Reformation attempted to change this, emphasizing congregational singing and worship in the vernacular. But by the 20th century, new forms of performing dissipate. Most people didn't understand. The actions happened behind screens and at the altar far from the people. The congregation's role was to observe and receive, not to participate. The Reformation attempted to change this, emphasizing congregational singing and worship in the vernacular.
Bitch, you suck, man.
But by the 20th century, new forms of performative worship had emerged. The evangelistic crusades of Billy Sunday and Billy Graham featured carefully choreographed music and altar calls. The televangelist era brought worship production to new levels of sophistication, optimized for camera angles and broadcast timing. Today, many churches function more like religious entertainment venues than communities of mutual transformation. The worship team performs from a stage while the congregation stands and watches, occasionally singing along. There are special effects, rehearsals, and performance quality standards. People leave evaluating the experience. Was the music good? Did I feel moved? Was it worth my time? But biblical worship was never meant to be evaluated like a performance. It was supposed to be a transformative encounter that realigned your life toward justice, mercy, and faithfulness. It was communal participation in something that bound you to your fellow worshipers in mutual obligation. It was the launching pad for ethical living, not an emotional experience to be consumed. Yet there's one final practice that might be the most subtle and therefore the most dangerous. In the ancient world, hospitality was sacred. To welcome a stranger was a religious duty. The book of Hebrews instructs, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. In Greco-Roman society and Jewish tradition, in early Christian practice, the welcome of the outsider was fundamental. Yet, throughout church history, the opposite has often prevailed. This brings us to the seventh and perhaps most pervasive practice. The creation of exclusive religious communities that function as social clubs for the culturally similar, rather than as inclusive movements that cross social boundaries. Jesus consistently violated the purity boundaries of his culture. He touched lepers who were considered unclean. He spoke with Samaritan women, breaking both ethnic and gender taboos. He ate with tax collectors and sinners, earning himself a reputation as a glutton and a drunkard because of the company he kept. His movement was radically inclusive in a stratified society.
Well, I'm going to do it now, Steve. Then I'll close all the curtains down.
Religion is under attack in America. Last weekend, around 100 clergy members in Minneapolis were arrested for peacefully protesting an occupation from a hostile military force. But because it's 2026 and we live in hell, right now what's happening is that our government is praying for the safety of ICE agents while arresting, harassing, and abusing clergy, believers, and generally peaceful protesters. And this playbook isn't new. On March 23, 1980, Catholic Archbishop Oscar Romero delivered a sermon calling for Salvadoran soldiers, most of whom were Christian, to choose God over government and refuse to carry out murders and human rights violations.
In his name, and in the name of our tormented people who have suffered so much and whose laments cry out to heaven, I implore you, I beg you, I order men's cry out.
She's cute. Boop, I touched her head. She's cute. I don't know why, but she's so adorable.
I implore you. I beg you. I order you. Stop the repression.
The next day, Romero gave mass at a hospital chapel. As he stood on the altar, a car pulled up out front. Someone got out, walked in, and assassinated him.
Muchos me dicen que debo de cuidarme un poco, que no ande exponiéndome. Pero yo siento que mientras camine en el cumplimiento de mi deber, que me desplace libremente a ser un pastor de las comunidades, Dios va conmigo y si algo me sucede, pues estoy dispuesto a todo.
Now, the American government quickly showed solidarity by pledging continued military support of the right-wing government that had Romero assassinated. And this
was that a woman with spear arms?
Of the right-wing government that had
with Pete.
Romero assassinated. And this was despite numerous protests against U.S. support for the Salvadoran military, including the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union refusing to continue delivery of military aid to the Salvadoran government. The U.S. later allowed official entry to the death squad leader who had ordered Romero's assassination, with documents showing that Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, both outspoken men of faith, were well aware of this and continued to offer him support nonetheless. So why does this keep happening? Why does a nation that so strongly identifies with Christianity continue to enable and justify the repression of and violence towards religious leaders and people of faith? In the example of Romero and El Salvador, where 3 American nuns and 1 lay missionary were also killed, along with 6 Jesuit priests, American foreign interests were committed to the fight against socialism and communism, represented by both an opposition political party and the leadership of the Catholic Church. And last week in Minnesota, the religious leaders standing with vulnerable and scared people were apparently also in their own way doing socialism or Antifa, or they were radical leftists funded by Soros. I don't know, something like that. They're the bad guys. The rabbis and the priests and the ministers, they're the bad ones. So what we really have here is America using the guise of being a nation of faith to prioritize the interest of capital over the safety and freedom of human beings, including those of faith. While Christianity offers a social vision grounded in community, where our humanity is always considered via its relation to a larger collective, the logic of capitalism demands that we are all atomized individuals, gaining meaning and value via our participation in the market. And because of this, socialism, even a biblically motivated socialism, is a threat to this brand of market individualism and a threat to the entire American project.
The best, most productive, and well-tested way of helping the poor is through market trade.
Which is why America has and is currently continuing to use a certain brand of Christian values as a thin veil for shoring up political and economic control.
Our values are under assault every single day, under a secular, atheist, leftist, Marxist movement.
Because hey, what's if you kidnapped children?
Pancakes are not long into a stalemate
for the sake of keeping the market strong. Today, I'm going to talk about how much of what presents itself as Christianity in America is just the logic of capitalism wearing its Sunday best.
Jesus wanted to clothe and feed the poor and give them housing. You hear Democrats talk about housing as a right, food as a right.
I don't know.
Those are
rights. Says that if you don't eat or you don't work, you don't eat.
Now, a more authentic vision of Christianity involves critiquing power and serving the oppressed rather than serving the powerful while critiquing the oppressed, which seems to be the current vibe, if I'm understanding it correctly.
I simply will not bend a knee to the cult of empathy.
Now, this is the third part in a series of videos I've been making on the politics and philosophy of American Christianity. You do not need to have watched the first 2 to get what I'm doing here, but I do recommend checking those out if you enjoy this one.
I see a dick in your future. I see a dick
on this one. It's meant a lot.
I see a dick in your future. I see a dick.
But now,
I see a dick in your future.
So in 2026, I really want to level up this channel, and one of my main inspirations for visual storytelling that's super philosophical and political is the work of Adam Curtis. He's a British filmmaker whose documentaries are only available on BBC iPlayer, which you unfortunately cannot access here in the US. But thanks to this video sponsor, Surfshark VPN, I can now check out Curtis's films on BBC iPlayer, plus a host of other content only available outside of the US. That's because Surfshark gives me a sort of online disguise, making it appear as if I'm browsing from my flat in Liverpool or my camper van on the shores of Argentina. And this way Surfshark opens up a whole world of new shows and films and documentaries by letting you virtually travel around the world. It's like a real open borders policy. More importantly, it keeps you safe when you're exploring the internet with increased security and privacy. And this is especially important if you you are ever using shared Wi-Fi networks or jumping online at a public workspace, because hackers can just drop in there, get on the network, and snatch your data up. But Surfshark makes sure that your online activity is encrypted no matter where you are. And Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in 100 countries, so when I'm using it, it really does feel like you have a sort of global passport to digitally go wherever the hell you want. And because the internet increasingly feels like we're living in a weird dystopian conspiracy world, I also really appreciate and love Surfshark antivirus. It works 24/7 to make sure that weird stuff's not getting on my computer, so I don't know, people can like watch my webcam and just stare at me when I sleep, if that's your sort of thing, you sickos. So if you want to stay safe online and watch weird British documentaries from anywhere in the world, check out Surfshark VPN. And if you go to surfshark.com/Burns, that's me, or just use my code Burns, also me, you'll get 4 extra months for free. And there's no risk in trying out Surfshark, as they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. Okay, now let's get back to talking about the bad romance of capitalism and Christianity. See you there.
I'm getting in your business! I'm getting into your business!
Okay, because no one likes a long sermon, I'm going to cut right to the point. Much of what we think as American Christianity, from the evangelical megachurch movement to Erica Kirk's TPUSA to Trump's executive orders to protect Christians, is little more than rampant capitalism and militarism in a spiritual posture. Many traced this brand of American evangelical capitalism back to the emergence of the moral majority and the rise of the neoconservative movement. But it actually goes way deeper, back to the early days of the American evangelical movement. In December 1940, Reverend James W. Fiffield Jr. was a speaker at the National Association of Manufacturers at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. Addressing a crowd of business leaders, Fiffield defended the American system of free enterprise while offering a full-on assault on Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration and their New Deal policies. Now, none of this would have been that shocking to a room full of capitalists, but what was surprising was Fiffield's call to utilize clergymen and the church to regain the upper hand in their war with Roosevelt. According to historian Kevin M. Cruz, Fiffield claimed that as men of God, ministers could voice the same conservative complaints as business leaders without any suspicion that they were motivated solely by self-interest. They could push back against claims made often by Roosevelt and his allies that business had somehow sinned and the welfare state was doing God's work. The assembled industrialist gave a rousing amen. This led to a long-term project of corporate America reinventing American Christianity in its own image for the sake of creating deeply ingrained support for the aims of free market capitalism. Fiffield himself was nicknamed the Apostle to Millionaires, and at his congregation in Los Angeles, he dismissed the many passages in the New Testament about wealth and poverty, and instead assured the elite that their worldly success was a sign of God's blessings. Oh, also once he said that Benjamin Franklin formally denounced the Jews at the Constitutional Convention of 1787. He had to run that one. He had to run that one back. So he sounds like a cool guy. Very cool guy. This movement, which has persisted as a continuous thread in U.S. society, is what Chris Lehman calls the money cult, defined as a frank celebration of wealth as a spiritual virtue in American Protestantism. Now, this is a religious cult in which you aren't simply a capitalist who's also a Christian. You are a capitalist because you are a Christian, and a Christian because you are a capitalist.
Secret of capitalism is Mark 10:45. Jesus said the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom. The only way you can succeed in capitalism is by serving people.
Lehman traces this movement back to the colonial American Protestant Christianity. He writes that the money cult's most fervent adherents from the first colonial generation forward were instinctively Gnostic believers. That is to say, they preached a highly distilled and militantly individualistic version of the solitary Puritan encounter with the divine. Now, Gnostic here means something like personal spiritual knowledge on the behalf of the believer that isn't mediated or confirmed via spiritual authority or some broader community. In a sense, these people weren't advocating for Christian capitalism because of a specific theological tradition. It was simply an obvious, almost innate spiritual truth.
The best place to search for evil is within.
And the implications of this Gnostic capitalist individualism go pretty far. as the emphasis on personal responsibility meant that one no longer needs to criticize systems of power and oppression. Instead, it's up to each individual to seek out their own glory and fortune. According to Lehman, this goes back to a Puritan understanding that inequality comes from God's broader plan of redemption. Early Puritans, such as John Winthrop, expressed this idea by arguing that society should be one organic whole. The poor should view those better than them with admiration, and the rich, well, they should reciprocate by moving towards social compassion for the poor. But as the money cult evolved, this naturalization of inequality was preserved, while the Puritan understanding of an integrated society came undone, thanks to the more radical individualist forms of Protestant faith, which were in tension with Puritanism almost from the moment that settlers arrived on the continent. A continent with no one on it. The settlers arrived on an empty continent that God had saved for them, and they didn't do anything bad. They just said, hey, anyone home? No one's here? Good. We're going to get to killing. We're going to get to cultivating. Build Christ stuff, not killing. So if inequality is natural and God intends some to exist in poverty, then there's no need to ethically critique a market that creates these conditions. This gets way more intense with the rise of Pentecostalism, where imminent millennial expectations of the personalized experience of the divine superimposed on a broader Protestant experience of consumer capitalism. For those of you that don't know what Pentecostalism is, it's the thing with speaking in tongues, and sometimes there's snakes, and what primarily matters here is the individual experience of God.
Man, that is of the devil.
I accidentally went to a college that was vaguely Pentecostal, and when I was there, a theology professor told me that because I had never spoken in tongues, I couldn't be sure if I was really a Christian, if I was really going to go to heaven, because I didn't go...
Not!
Speaking in tongues is crazy. If you've ever spoken in tongues, no judgment. Like, what was that like? Lehman writes that the imbuing spirit of Pentecost scattered throughout the kindred southern denominations, now basking in the prosperity of the Golden State, was forging a new social contract. The far-flung aerospace suburbs of the Southlands were repurposing the gospel message in their image, spawning non-denominational parachurches, hosting revival efforts, targeting college youth and businessmen, and most of all, advancing a stalwart vision of what Dr. dubs a new gospel of wealth, one that identified threats to pristine government and big government, and urged stalwart vision of what college youth and businessmen, and most of all, advancing a stalwart vision of what Dr. dubs a new gospel of wealth, one that identified threats to pristine government and big government, and urged parishioners to protest a political order whose bureaucratic tendencies and Keynesian initiatives undermined the just and godly imperatives of laissez-faire capitalism. You know, if traditional practices like the Catholic Mass advocated for a type of communal spirit that was dangerously close to the temptations of communism, well, this type of hyper-individualist spirituality mimicked the magical experience of market consumption. In the late 20th century, this flows into a type of American Christianity where a sense of community and history was replaced with megachurch preachers and televangelists. Lehman writes that this culture enabled money cult believers to recapture that primal American faith famously summoned by Thomas Paine, the ever-renewable power to make the world anew. And this has paved the way for where we are today, with Christianity as a motivating and justifying force behind the project of not just American free market capitalism, but also the increasingly racialized brand of militant nationalism, in which this particular vision of America must be defended at all costs. Now, there's a lot more that could be said here, and I encourage anyone interested in the full details to check out Lehman's book, but I think the most important factor here is the emphasis on individualism.
Man and society are renewed at the same time in the Marxist theology, whereas with the Christian theology, your renewal begins the moment you accept Christ. Period. It's totally individual decision.
One that becomes a kind of institutionalized individualism. You know, to quote a dead piece of shit, in this world, there is no such thing as society. There are just individual actors working towards economic and spiritual salvation all on their own.
Everything he called as far as helping the poor in Matthew 5, essentially. The Sermon on the Mount, the charge for us Christians, it starts and ends with the individual calling, not the collective calling. It's super important that you can't abdicate your own responsibility to somebody else, to some other authority except yourself.
And this distortion of Christianity upholds an individualist ontology that turns anything collective or communal into something inherently demonic or anti the true spirit of God. I abhor and hate the modern social justice movement. Every single thing about it is antithetical to every single thing about Christianity. This is why 20th century American evangelicalism has consistently embraced a Cold War emphasis on socialism, communism, and Marxism as scare tactics, warning that these ideologies are not only anti-free market, but anti the very spirit of Christ.
Social justice that was emerging in our society today, what is called social justice, was a mimicking or a distortion of Christian ideals in a ways that he identified as of the Antichrist.
Now, functionally, this has created generations of politicized Christians who have never read a word of Marx, but would gladly explain to you why he's evil and wants to make your kids gay. Or something? Is that what Marx... Is that... Fact check? Is Marx's whole thing making the kids... He wants the kids to read books about gay cartoons that make them gay? I think it's something like that.
The kingdom of God is like an entrepreneur. The kingdom of God is like a businessman.
Well, it's more than just a cabal of neoconservatives utilizing Christianity to create the ideological and theological justification for America's shift towards full-on free market capitalism.
Bitch.
The reason this project was so easy to pull off is that capitalism itself was already imbued with a certain form of religiosity, one shaped by the type of Protestant Christianity that was foundational to American religion. Now, German philosopher Walter Benjamin famously argued for this sort of theological reading of the market in his excerpt, Capitalism as Religion. Now, according to Benjamin, one of the features of capitalism is that it uses debt to create an escalating cycle of religious guilt.
I think it's pretty bad if you have to use a credit card when you go to a fast food restaurant for something as little as $3.10.
But, unlike the atonement promised to Christians, in the money cult of capitalism, there is no redemption, only accusation. As he sees it, we're all sinners in the eyes of the God of money, and as our debt increases, so does that sense of guilt. Benjamin also sees capitalism as offering answers to existential questions. You know, the questions that religion is supposed to answer. So that meaning is no longer found in churches or temples, but in the glory of the market itself. Marx made similar arguments, famously writing about the fetishism of commodities in Volume 1 of Capital, describes the way in which manufactured products take on human and even supernatural qualities. Now, that concept sounds a little abstract. Just think about the last time that you ordered something online or bought something in a store where you felt like that object was going to heal you, give your life meaning, give you some sort of purpose. I know for me sometimes if I order a piece of music gear or a book I'm excited about, I anticipate its arrival like I'm going to be baptized anew when it gets there. And I never am, because I'm just buying stuff. They're just commodities, babe. They're just commodities, babe. Sorry for calling you babe. Now, in this way, capitalism has always had a religious structure, even before Protestants in Europe and America blended the two together to create a money cult. Eugene McCarr writes about this at length in The Enchantments of Mammon, how capitalism became the religion of modernity. Now, this book argues that hundreds of years before anti-Semitic ministers instructed the capitalist class on how to use Christianity to manufacture consent for their own free market project, capitalism was already sort of doing a 69 with theology. Now, this turned capitalism into something more nuanced than simply greed. It became the belief that accumulation of wealth via hard work could be done for the sake of God's glory and majesty. And hey, what's a better testament to the individual spirit of both capitalism and Christianity than the figure of the brave businessman and the entrepreneur creating wealth from nothing? You know, in doing so, aren't they imitating God's own act of creation? Creating something from nothing?
Wow,
I get it. I get it now.
The only thing that moves people out of poverty is a job. Period.
Stuck my dick in his butt.
And the job creator